I'm going to show you how to use a piercing saw or jeweler saw. If you have a choice, when you buy a saw, buy the shortest distance here that you can. This makes it a lot more controllable. If you have a really long saw, it's a little bit awkward. The saw teeth point up and towards the handle, because when we saw, we're sawing on a bench peg and we'll be pulling down, and it cuts when you pull down. To put the blade in the saw, you rest this end on your bench peg and you hold it against your chest. That way it gives you two hands to work with the blade. If you're left-handed, they do have saws that have these on the other side. So you just lean into the saw as you tighten this, and it will give you the proper tension. Should have a nice ping. If it doesn't, and you have difficulty with it, what you can do is rest this end on your bench peg, loosen the clamp, push down a little bit and tighten it, and it should make it nice and tight. Now you should be able to run your finger gently down the blade and have it just be smooth, and if you just carefully touch towards the top, it should catch your finger. Be very careful with this. It's extremely sharp. It will cut you severely if you don't pay attention. So what I've done is I've glued a pattern to a piece of silver, and what you want to do is make sure that this is level. So if you're trying to saw on a bit of an angle, it's a little bit awkward, but if you always make sure that your bench pin is flat, it's a lot easier. So what you do when you start is run the blade up at an angle, up, and that will smooth one little spot off so that when you pull the saw down, it'll start to cut. So as you saw, try to use the whole length of the saw blade, and you'll be holding this down with the hand you're not sawing with. And sometimes it's easier to just make your hand like a clamp, so you have your finger underneath and your thumb on top, or vice versa, finger on top, thumb underneath. Because you need to keep this from jumping up and down, because it'll break a saw blade like that if this moves. So to replace the blade, hold it with your chest. Make sure that the teeth point up and towards you. So once again, it should be smooth and catch as you push up. So you don't have to hold the saw blade. You don't have to hold the saw itself really tight. You can just gently hold it, and because it's so sharp, it will cut in fairly quickly. Gentle pressure forward. Now when you come to turn a corner, only ever turn the piece if the saw is moving up and down. Slowly turn the piece, following your line and your pattern. When you stop sawing, stop turning. If it catches, oftentimes you can just turn loose with this hand, lift the blade up, and it will turn back to where you should be. Start again. And when you get to a place where you need to turn a sharp corner, stop cutting in, just move the saw up and down, and slowly move the piece. So I'm not pushing forward at all. stop. And if you take your time, the saw blade will actually turn in its own length, which is a very small amount of space. Once you get to where you want to go, start moving forward again. Always cutting to the outside of your line. They call that the waste side, and it's so that you can file and sand to the line. Now when you come to the edge of the metal and the blade is going to break out, make sure that you don't have your finger in front of it. You can see I have a cut in my bench peg, and what I do is I just move it forward so when the blade comes out it goes into the wood rather than my finger. Like that. Now if you're going to drill a hole and saw on the inside, anytime you saw on the inside of a piece of metal is what we call piercing. So what you do is always make a mark for your saw blade. Put it on your bench plate, not your bench peg. Put your punch where you want to drill. One gentle hit, like that. Don't try to drive the punch through, it doesn't work that way. So anytime you're going to pierce a hole, drill. So this is a 1mm drill bit. Anytime you're drilling, be sure you wear safety glasses. Anytime you're using any machinery that spins, make sure that you have glasses or safety glasses between you and the machinery. So you just rest the drill bit in that depression, hold the piece, spin it up, and make sure you hold the piece. If you don't, when the drill goes through and you come back up, the piece will spin around rapidly. Usually it'll break the drill bit. When that happens, the piece will fly off, and if you have a sharp edge on the piece, it'll cut you or your neighbor. So always make sure you hold this piece, either with your hand or pliers, bench vise, anything. If it's smooth, you can hold it with your fingers. If it has a ragged edge at all, you can use parallel jaw pliers or your bench vise, or a little vise made for a drill press, but it works quite good for this. Once you've drilled the hole in your piece, rest your saw on your bench peg again and just loosen the top of your saw blade. Slide the piece over your blade, and because this is as rigid as it will hold itself in place if you slide it all the way down here. Reclamp the blade, and now you're ready to saw on the inside. Always make sure that your blade is straight up and down when you're sawing. If you're on a really steep angle, you actually double the amount of saw blade that's in the metal, and you stand a better chance of breaking your blade. When you've pierced out your design, take it off the blade, and this is the point where you'll start using your jeweler's files, because you'll want the file to match what you're filing. So if it's a triangular hole, use a triangular file. If it's a round hole, use a round file. If you're filing the outside and you want it nice and smooth, a flat file, I usually use a number 2 cut flat file. Number 2 is a medium cut. And you file and follow the curve of the outside. If you file across, it'll leave flat marks all the way around and it won't be a smooth shape. So just follow the curve of the shape. I usually hold it in my fingers. You can hold it on your bench peg. File this way. Files only cut when you're pushing forward. When you have your shape filed so that you've gotten rid of your saw marks, then you'll take your sanding stick. I usually start with a 400 grit on the sanding stick, and then that will be next after your number 2 cut hand file. Okay?